Bonjour, Zdravstvuyte, Konnichiwa, Hello, Ciao, Buenas noches, and hello. I wanted to do a video on why I have such an opposition towards integration. When I was diagnosed in 1991, when I was seeing Dr. Warren, back then that was the goal. If you were ever diagnosed with MPD, DID, that was the goal. Be integrated, become a whole person, fix the issue. Immediately when I started treatment, and that obviously was the goal of the therapist, I had a lot of resistance, a lot of opposition, and my alters didn't want to be integrated. When we heard the term, I didn't really understand it, so I did research on it. And when they found out what it meant, what it would ultimately mean, they freaked out, they panicked. And I think that's why I started switching even more at that point. I believe I had mentioned that I was switching so often in the beginning when I was first diagnosed that I remembered about half an hour out of every day. Because of that resistance, I had to stop treatment. I stopped seeing Dr. Warren in 1992. And then I didn't see a therapist again until I started seeing Sheila in 1996. And during that time, they just seemed very mad at me, very angry with me. I understand why. I completely understand why now. To an alter, integration equals death. If you ask them what it means, I can't speak for everybody, but I would say that a large majority would see it that way. I'm reading some books because I'm getting ready to write a nonfiction book proposal for my book. And one of the books that I'm reading, let's see, A Mind of My Own, which is the follow-up. I know you can't really see that very well because it's bass-ackwards. It says A Mind of My Own, and it's the woman who was known as Eve tells the story of her triumph over multiple personality disorder. And there was a couple of lines in here that really disturbed me, that basically it was her full intention to integrate right from the beginning. I also read, there's a more recent book out by an actual therapist. I think he's in Chicago, and it's the harrowing real story of his triumph with this client named Karen. And he included some of the letters that she and and her system had written to him. And it just sounded like right from the beginning there was absolutely no compromise. They were going to integrate, or they just weren't going to be his client. And one of the things that I didn't like about that book was the fact that he made himself the hero, for one thing. It just made it seem like the book was about him and what he had done for her. And it was really about, he gave instruction and it was up to her and her system whether they were going to follow the instruction. That's what it comes down to. But his instruction was for integration. And they would pick and choose who was going to integrate next. Now, I don't know about you guys, But if I was an alter in that system, fuck, I would find ways to hide, you know? Like, don't volunteer me for integration. When I started seeing Sheila, she told me right from the beginning that we weren't going to work on integrations. That was not something that we were even going to talk about. And we never did. We never talked about what it would be like for me if I had integrated or if I chose integration. We never talked about stuff like that. We talked about getting to a place where I could communicate with my system. And I thought that was really bizarre at first. Why would I want to talk to them? Why would I want to get to know them? Why would I see them as anything other than intruders in my life? And when she started going through the different steps and she started laying them out for me, the 5 steps, I started to realize that they deserve to be here. After everything that they did, after everything that they went through. Can you imagine? Just imagine for just a couple of minutes, just put yourself as your alter. Okay? You're an alter. There's one reason you were ever created. One reason. And you open your eyes, and the very first thing you see, very first thing, your very first concept of the world, rape, beatings, mutilation, watching somebody else go through that, being trapped, name it. That is what they went through. A lot of psychologists don't understand that you can't just treat the core. By treating the core, you ignore, by just solely treating the core, you are missing the fundamental aspect and existential reality of what it is to be MP. And that is, the alters went through the exact same trauma. They went through the exact same abuse. They also need to have someone sit there and treat them as an individual, not as a group, not as a whole, not as a system, but as one person with their own personality, with their own wants, needs, desires, fears, angst, name it. Then you start there. For instance, when I was at the psychiatric hospital in August or September, Beth came out during one of my sessions with the psychiatrist. Now this man has been a psychiatrist for 35 years. Okay? For more than half his life, he has been a psychiatrist. Okay? He talks to Beth comes out and says hi to him, or she's already out, and when she goes in to see him, and, she sits down, she starts talking, and he's blown completely out of the water. Blown. He has no idea how to proceed. He has no idea what to say or do. He doesn't even acknowledge that she's a separate personality. He actually said to her, "So you're Beth today." Primarily saying that it was me pretending to be this other person. And he couldn't understand why it was happening. He couldn't understand what to do from there. So the session that normally went for 15 minutes lasted all of 5. And he sent her back to group And that was it. And the next time I saw him, he didn't even bring it up. It was like it never even happened. It's in my medical records, but he didn't really even address it. That's because when you go to when you study psychology, okay, there's this vast network of mental illness that you have to deal with. And you deal with everything. Narcissism, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations, homicidal ideations. You deal with all this stuff. So because there's so much to learn and so much to deal with, and because MPD and DID is such a rare disorder, it doesn't happen and it doesn't occur as often as people say it does. There's like a small little window of time that they spend on MPD DID. One of my someone that I befriended from YouTube was actually telling me that she was going to start speaking in classes at a university near her, and I thought that was a fantastic idea. What better way to show the new generation of psychologists and psychiatrists what MPD really is by presenting somebody with it, and not just spending a few days on it. I get a lot of emails from students, a few of them from other countries, where they almost don't have any knowledge of MPD or DID, and that's sad. I think one of them was from Norway or Denmark, but she was telling me that they had like a tiny little blurb in their textbook about it, and that was about it. But it was fascinating enough for her that she went to YouTube and she did a search on MPD DID, and she came across my first MPD video, and she laid out a bunch of questions for me, and I hope I answered them well enough. But if this is something that needs to be treated, okay? I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but I'm saying that instead of going into it with the idea of integration, go into it with cooperation. Let them decide if they want to be meshed with the core personality or if they want to be left as is. If they are comfortable with living the life as it is right now, then why change anything? Just like I said in my very first video, it is your therapy, not your doctor's. It is your therapy. Your doctor will always have a client. Period. If you are seeing someone who's pressuring you into integration and it makes you feel uncomfortable, say something. They work for you. They take your money. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. Just like if Dr. Kelman started talking to me about... It's just like if my psychologist started talking to me about integration, I would have to stop her and tell her my reservations about it. The whole point to this video is the psychologists and psychiatrists that are coming out of the schools now are taught that the only way to succeed with a patient who has MPD-DID is to integrate the system. And I'm saying that isn't always true. Like 9 times out of 10, I think a person and a system will benefit more from cooperation than they will from integration. Sybil had mentioned a few years after she had integrated that it was lonely for her. that she didn't like the idea that she had integrated. Trudy Chase, her system stopped the integration process when they got to a certain number, and they remained a cooperative. Cooperative throughout the rest of her life, and I was sad to learn that she died last May. She was probably one of the most fascinating MPs in the world that we know of. I think what really fascinated me most about her is when I saw her her interview with Oprah Winfrey. I can't remember what year it was. But if anybody has ever seen it, you would know exactly how in tune to each other they were. And it wasn't just a matter of someone was talking and then they switched and then they had to kind of catch up in their mind. No, it was, she was switching every few minutes, but they never stopped the sentence structure. So one of them would start talking about horses, and the next person would come out and they would continue that train of thought. And the next person, and the next person, and the next person. If you think about it like that, they had the most intense cooperation I have ever seen in a system. And it was just absolutely brilliant, because the core had disappeared a long time ago. They had to function that way. And the way that they lived was just so beautiful. They worked as one continuous being, one continuous structure. And I think that a lot of systems will benefit from that. I really do. I really do believe that cooperation should be the ideal and not integration. I don't think that telling somebody that they are branded for death is going to make it a conducive treatment or make it conducive for treatment. That's really all I needed to say about that. I realized that I had never gone into depth about why I thought the way I did about cooperation versus integration. I hope this was useful. It was primarily for the psychology students and the psychiatry students who may be doing some research on MPD and DID and may come across this video. But if you guys have any other questions about that and how I feel about that, and anything that Sheila and I may have talked about as far as cooperation, just send me a message, send me an email, and I will definitely start up a dialogue with you. I think that's very beneficial to see where everybody is. Okay, and I will talk to you later. Au revoir, ciao, auf Wiedersehen, adios, and wait, is konnichiwa hello or goodbye? I'm not sure, but I will talk to you guys later.